Welcome back, everybody. This is GDS. Today's video is going to be about the dreaded player types, but I'm going to try to say something which I think is hopefully useful and will help you run your game better and have more fun. But before we start the video, I want you to go to the blah blah below, that's the comments, and let me know, how do you make a game that excites your players? This seems like a simple topic, but seriously, I want to hear, how do you make a game that's interesting for your players? This is a small channel, I don't get many comments, so if you comment below, I'm going to see it, heart it, and very likely respond, so let's get a conversation going. My advice in this video is going to divide into two parts. The first one is going to be content, what should be in your game, and the second one is going to be meta, which is considering the players you have and the promises you make them, what role do you expect each player to take in the party, and how do you respond as the GM? So to figure out what content to have in your game to excite your players, the first thing I would figure out is, what kind of things excite you? Keep in mind that this can be a range of things that might contradict each other. For example, you might say you're excited by, say, Western sci-fi, but you're also excited by, say, fantasy, D&D, dungeon delving, low fantasy stuff. This is the part where you want to brainstorm the possibilities of content you might want to run. The reason you want to do this is because you are also a player in the game, but you play a different role, the role of the GM. That said, you still need to be excited about the game because your excitement, or lack thereof, will infect your players. Now that you've figured out what kind of things you would enjoy running, it's time to figure out what kind of things your players would enjoy you running. The main difficulty I find here is that, in my experience, even experienced players don't know what games they want to play when you ask them. My solution to this problem assumes you know a thing or two about the players, which is probably a good idea anyways if you're going to be playing with them. And it is for each player, add a narrative promise in the content of your game that that player would be interested in. Now, you don't need to know much about your world yet, or your narrative, or the player for that matter. All you need to know is, if I promised this player X, it would make them go, oh wow, that's cool. Remember from my video about promises, progress, and payoff that promises don't have to be concrete things, they can be things like tone. So while a promise can be riding a dragon or uncovering a mystery, it can also be a tone promise like, say, like we said before, the space opera western. Using your best estimation of what your players would think is cool to have in the world and what promises would likely inspire them, you can figure out what content you want to put in your world. And if you're still not sure what I mean by promises and you're confused, I have a video about promises, progress, and payoff like I mentioned, and it's going to be either here or here, I never remember. So that's what I think you should do for content. Now, for how to handle each type of player and what to expect, I'm sure you've seen many videos by now breaking down player types. And if you have, you'll also notice that these videos all have different types of players and a different number of types. That's because, and I think the people who make those videos would agree, the division of players into universal types is arbitrary. One, because there is no reason to believe that players actually divide into distinct types, and two, because the same player can be a different player type in two different games. A player called Matt might be a power gamer in game A, but they might be a storyteller in game B. This is why I tend to think of things less as player types and more of what role does this player take in this game. So in your game, because you include a promise per player on the content of the game, I think it's actually pretty easy to figure out what kind of role the player will end up playing as a result of that promise. For example, if a player in your game is excited by a tone promise, they will probably be more of an observer in your game, rolling dice, but mostly just looking around and thinking to themselves, this is so cool. As another example, if a player is excited by the promise of uncovering a mystery, they're probably going to be interacting with the world and unraveling mysteries and questioning NPCs, so they will take the role of, say, an investigator in this party. A player who is excited with the promise of becoming powerful or influential is likely to become the party tactician or negotiator or a min-maxer. All of these roles I mentioned are arbitrary and they're all totally fine. There's nothing wrong with a particular one. You just want to use your intuition to make sure that the roles are generally balanced such that the game is fun for everyone. For example, you can imagine that a game with, say, 3 min-maxer and 1 storyteller might not be much fun for everyone involved. Or if you have a game with 5 observers, it would be difficult for you to run, and I imagine the observers won't have much to observe because nothing would be happening. So now that we went over how I like to think about player types in terms of what content I'm going to have in my game, and on a meta level, what role I expect the player to take in the game, let me just give you a quick example. Say I'm planning a session for 4 players, and I'm running in a classic D&D setting. For each player, I want to figure out 1, what promise can I make that will make them go, oh, that's cool. 2, as a result of that promise, what role do I expect them to take in the party? And finally, 3, once I do this for all my players, does it seem like the party is more or less balanced? Let's say player 1 just finished watching House of the Dragon, they like fantasy, and they love anything dragon related. For this player, in terms of the content of my game, I might want to include a plot about the dragons having mysteriously disappeared, and no one knows what happens, and there is a possibility of them maybe coming back. The promise I would make the player that would make them go, oh, that's cool, is that the mystery of the dragon's disappearance can be solved. And not only that, but once dragons return, they might be able to write them. I might also include some content about secret, ancient, dragon-related items that have been lost to history that can be refound. For what role this player will play in the party, I would imagine an investigator. They're probably going to look around for clues, try to solve the mystery that excites them, and talk to NPCs, stuff like that. Let's say player 2 has never really done anything TTRPG related, but I know that they're generally into business and finance. For them, I might want to include, say, a set of different guilds that compete with each other and have different motivations. The player would be able to interact with different factions to eventually come out on top. The promise here for the players is that if they play their cards right, they can become powerful and influential in the world. Maybe I'll also include a little economy system with different magic items that the players find that they can sell or barter to different adventuring parties. In terms of role, I imagine this player is going to be talking to NPCs a lot and might become the party negotiator. Because of the finance and business systems we're talking about, I think this player is likely to think about the game in their own free time, figuring out different ways to make a profit or to pitch enemies against each other. I want to make sure that when they do that, I play into it and allow it. Let's say player 3 has some experience with TTRPG, but mostly they like video games and they love tactical games like Mount & Blade or Total War. For this player, in terms of content, maybe the wilderness is dangerous, not only because of monsters, but also because of competing adventuring parties. Maybe I can make a group of adventurers that is a rival to our group of adventurers. The promise here to the player is that their opposition can be overcome by outsmarting and outmaneuvering them. And maybe also the possibility of gaining reputation as a great tactician or fighter. Whatever I choose to do specifically in terms of content, I have to make sure that the combat and strategic challenges are interesting and open-ended. And in terms of what role this player will take in the party, I imagine they'll probably take the role of the party tactician. They're probably going to make a character that's combat-focused, and they're probably going to help other people in combat make choices that they think are optimal. Now for player 4, let's say that they're kind of new to TTRPGs, they're new to gaming, and they've only really played cozy games like Animal Crossing. For this player, maybe while the wilderness is dangerous, it also has a host of animals that can be befriended and become pets. Maybe there are also abandoned towns that are surrounded by big great walls, which makes them safe and ready for development. The promise here for the player that would make them go, oh, that sounds cool, is to find and train a host of fun, cute, and useful creatures, as well as building a base that's fun and also useful for the rest of the party. If I don't have one already, it would be very useful here to find a system for companions/pets as well as base building. And in terms of player roles, I'll imagine that this player is going to be mostly an observer, except when they interact with their own minigames regarding their cute animals and base building. I hope that full example was useful for you to see how you can use player types to figure out what content to have in your game and what to expect from your players. Now, I just want to quickly troubleshoot some potential issues. The first one is that you should be open to the possibility that the game you want to run is not the game that your players want to play. If that's the case, that's okay. That's just life, and it happens. You can run your game for a different party, and when you're with the original group of friends, you can play board games or watch movies, or maybe have someone else run a game that everyone will enjoy. The second troubleshooting is more of a warning that while the promises we make players should make them go, oh, that sounds cool, and excite them, it might not necessarily motivate them. And what I mean here is that excitement alone is often not enough to motivate players to do things. Players are risk averse, and if we plan our sessions right, whatever excites them that they want to attain is going to be behind some kind of obstacle. Because of their risk averse nature, instead of overcoming the obstacle to get what they like, they're just going to avoid it and go do other stuff. What I'm trying to say is, while having your players excited is very interesting, it is not a replacement for session drama and having quests with good anatomies. I have, I think, pretty good videos on both drama and the anatomy of a quest, and you can check them out here or here, but definitely in the nonsense below. The third thing you should troubleshoot or be aware of is that while the promises you make each player may be different, they should have some common elements. What I mean by that is that even though each player has their own promise that interests them, they're still going to be part of the same world and the same game. In that regard, the promises that you make them are basically sub-narratives of the main narrative that everyone is playing through. And to make sure that the overarching narrative is coherent, you have to make sure that there is some logical or reasonable relation between the promises you give the players. You could tell that in my example, I was relating everything to the D&D-esque world. The point of this exercise is to have these sub-narratives that make up this greater overarching narrative that everyone is interested and excited by. That's everything I have to say about types of players and stuff like that. If you enjoyed the video and you made it this far, please smash your head into the like button. I need you to smash it so hard that your hand goes through your monitor. And I need you to do it an odd number of times. Let's go to 151. If you're not subscribed, I need you to also smash the subscribe button. Let's just do it again an odd number of times. So if you're already subscribed, do an even number of times. Let's go for, just keep it simple, 1 or 2. 1 for odd and 2 for even. And I hear there's also a bell, so you can click that and get notifications whenever I upload anything. I can't tell you how much this stuff helps me as a YouTuber because I honestly don't know. I have no idea how the algorithm works. I don't think anyone really does, but I hear it helps. Anyways, thank you for making it this far. I appreciate your viewership, and I'll see you later.